Alafia, I'm Dr. Gloria Lattimore Peace, host and producer of OmniU Presents the H3O Art of Life show. The title of this show is part one of what's going on. The question, the statement, the continued examination of what is going on, expletive deleted. And I have with me three gentlemen who are able to engage this topic in a very interesting and meaningful way, and I'm glad to greet them. I will begin by greeting Nate Clay, who is a journalist and world traveler and political activist and a very well-known personality around the city and elsewhere. And then, of course, I'd like to introduce Bruce Crosby, who is the chairman of the Committee to Preserve Voting Rights. And finally, Fred Carter, who is the director of the Black Oak Center. I asked the question, what's going on, because there's such a great deal going on, and there's so much focus and scattered focus on so many different things at one time. Everybody is looking at or concerned about the economy. Everybody is looking at, concerned about the election. Few people are looking at and concerned about what the agenda for black people ought to be, whether the election goes one way or another, whether the economy goes one way or another. And I think we ought to just look at what it is we're dealing with and see if we can shed some light somewhere that we might be able to see something about a direction. So with having said that, I think I would ask Fred Carter to lead off, because he's green. And green is the new black. We look at the economy and the ecology as twins. We understand that if you have global warming and we're not here, we don't have to worry about the economy. And if we survive and we are here, then we have to worry about the economy and we have to worry about the election. So we have to get some priorities, and I'm just going to prioritize that our survival and development as a people must be our main focus, and then included in that then is all these other issues. So Fred, how does it look? What's going on? How does it look from where you sit?
I'm great to hear you say what's important is our survival. The election is not going to determine our survival. And the economy, if we allow it to determine our survival, there is no survival. So it's a lot going on above surface water, just like on the waters of the oceans. It's a lot of rippling going on, and we get distracted by it. The election, the economy, these are not things that just happen. They're long undercurrents that's starting to surface. And as a community, we have no control over that. But what we do have control over, we need to quickly identify what that is and focus on that. The economy, these are the conversation that the rich boys are having about how much more we can suck. It's a conversation that we don't sit in those rooms and have those conversations. We don't, as a community, we don't sit in rooms and have conversation about the distribution of any resources, be it money, food, or finance, or anything. So our survival is where we should really look at. What survival rests on is having food, good clean water, housing, and also economic yields that can sustain that. And those things should be done in a way that they can be sustained. Now how I'm looking at what's happening, these are systems that's been based on unsustainable principles, and they're collapsing. And they're trying to do whatever they can do to maintain it, but it's not something that can be maintained. But everybody is engaged in the conversation because the media, and up underneath that, there's another current that's occurring that really threatens our sustainability. But we're not focused on that. The erosion in the quality of our food, the fact that our food system is based on an international distribution system that has already collapsed, the fact that we have other depleting things that this whole economy is built on, that there's problems, nobody wants to talk about it, we want to stay distracted. And so as a community, how I look at it is that we need to sort of pause and look at how we can create some kind of parallel system of structure that we can embrace, that we have control over, no matter what that might be. We need to quickly identify that, because the other one is running out of control very quickly. But it didn't just happen overnight. It's something that's been undercurrent and now it's starting to surface. The economy, the whole conversation about we got our foundation, or what did Al McCain say? We got solid principles.
Fundamentals.
Solid fundamentals. When your economy is based on extraction of natural resources without any limits on it, that's not a solid fundamental. So the capitalist structure that we've been conditioned to love and embrace is collapsing, because it's been sustained from the extraction, be it human or from the natural resources, there are limits to those things. And as the population has intensified, you have more humans requesting that same basic right to have food, water, shelter, and economic opportunity, which is based on extracting from natural resources. So I'm glad to hear you say our survival. And we have to quickly start identifying that and distinguishing that our survival does not depends on who's going to be in that office in November. I'm caught in the thrill of a black man being the president, and also in the possibility that the leadership can have a conversation of inclusiveness, because the other groups don't have a conversation of inclusiveness. And none of those parties will stop what's surfacing from the economy, the environment, all of it. But one thing I can say, at least, like, there's a friend of mine who wrote a book called The Oil Depletion, and it's a white fellow. He said, I voted for Obama because at least while we're in hell, somebody will inspire me. We're not going to avoid going to hell, because we're going into some very, very tough times. And our community, like we was having a conversation on the way here, we're used to having tough times, but we've never had the times that we're getting ready to experience now. We've had depressions, we've had points where we've been unemployed, but we never had the combination of storms which impact the environment, which impact the Gulf, which impact the gas. People in Atlanta don't have gas, they can't get around. We never had that before. So it's a whole new paradigm, and there are people, we need to start looking at how we can transition our communities to a way of living that we can mitigate ourselves through these challenges. It doesn't matter who's the president, and in a way it does and it doesn't, because neither one of the parties will be able to stop what's going to happen. It's been a long cycle. It didn't happen in 4 months or 4 years or 8 years. This is something that's been going on for a very long time.
And that is your opening statement.
That's my opening statement.
We'll be back for more. Who wants to come next, or shall I just designate Bruce Crosby?
Well, you know, I'm from the school that thinks that it is very important for the environment who's the president, who's the governor, and who's the mayor, and who's the president of the Cook County Board. I think those political leaders play vital roles in changing how we address the environmental issues and concerns of the people from a national, a state, and a county and a city perspective. The Committee to Preserve Voting Rights is very concerned about the political environment because we're concerned that there will be tricks that the Republicans use in many states around the country. We saw them in the past in Ohio. We saw them in Florida to actually steal the election. I mean, all indicators are that the Republicans have ran the country into the ground, and that the people should be ready to make the switch to Democratic leadership. There's a feeling that white people are incapable of voting for a black leader, and so that they may be resistant in supporting Obama for president, and their natural instincts would lead them to going back to McCain and the Republicans. And we think that the Republicans are going to try to use every method to try to steal the election. So we're very concerned. We're concerned about Barack Obama's willingness to fight for voting rights if it gets down to it on election day and beyond. We're concerned about the upcoming reapportionments. We're concerned about who's going to replace Barack Obama in the United States Senate. We're concerned about our upcoming governor's election and our upcoming election for president of the Cook County Board. So we think these are very important times and very critical times for people in general.
Nate Clay.
Well, I will piggyback on some of the concepts that Bruce enunciated. Black people are experts at survival. We have survived some of the most unimaginable horrors ever faced by any people. We survived slavery, we survived transatlantic crossings, we survived following slavery, neo-slavery in the form of Jim Crow laws. We survived being the only group in this country where that it was legal to discriminate against. So we are masters at survival. But that's not to say simultaneously that we can overcome any and everything. There are some serious challenges facing us. And I agree with Bruce, a leader does make a difference. And we went through the Great Depression. You heard very few stories of blacks jumping out of windows, committing suicide. We survived. Somehow, that old saying, we made a way out of no way, there is some depth, some real truism to that. We are masters at surviving. We have survived some of the greatest horrors ever imposed on a people. And I think now, with all of the problems the country is facing, we cannot be an island unto ourselves. We must be interconnected, because if the country has a cold, black folk will catch pneumonia. We are part of this economy, however unfortunate it may be. We live in a globalized world. No man, this is truer now than ever, no man is an island unto himself. We cannot survive being disconnected. And Obama, I see in Obama's candidacy, he reminds me in many ways of the transformative presidential tenure of Roosevelt. Roosevelt came to power, Herbert Hoover, a Republican, sat and watched the deepening financial crises, which led to the greatest financial horror this country has ever faced, the Great Depression. Roosevelt came in, and initially, like the Treasury Secretary Paulson, initially he undertook to save the financiers, the ones who got us into that situation in 1932. But he heard the outcry of the people. People were marching in the streets. We cannot expect our leaders to do our will if we elect them and then go home and just celebrate and hoist the champagne. When Roosevelt looked out the window and saw those citizens marching, protesting his prevalence, his reach out to the people who caused the Depression, he switched horses in the middle of the stream. And he came up with some of the most imaginative programs. It saved capitalism, it saved the country. The programs Roosevelt came up with put people back to work. Roosevelt, the Work Progress Program, he came up, Social Security, which all, by the way, the Republicans opposed, all of them. Social Security, to give elderly Americans a safety net. It was all of the major programs designed to help poor people, started with the New Deal, and were expanded on by the Great Society of President Johnson. But it took the bonus marchers to force Roosevelt to do what he probably in his heart knew was the right thing to do, but because of the class that he came from, was initially more inclined to look out for the welfare of those people. It took Martin Luther King to force a white Southerner raised in a very racist environment in the South, President Johnson, to do the right thing. Martin Luther King. Roosevelt, in fact, told A. Philip Randolph, when A. Philip Randolph first threatened to organize a march on Washington, he met with Roosevelt and he laid out all the problems the black community was facing. Roosevelt listened very solemnly. He nodded to A. Philip Randolph. He said, you know, Randolph, you are absolutely right. Agree with everything you said. Now go out there and make me do it. And that's what they did. Go out there and make me do it. Barack Obama is that transformative figure that the United States at this moment in our history that we need. And so our fate is not isolated from the fate of other Americans. There's no way. We are masters at survival, but we would be foolishly endangering our ability to face these present challenges if we were not an integral part of the solution and not just sitting back suffering from the problem.
Well, you know, I think that Barack has to be a fantastic campaign.
It wouldn't be this far.
He's raised more money than I've ever seen any candidate raise for president of the United States.
$66 million in the last month.
But his real test is going to come in being president and taking on these challenges.
That's right.
And actually being that transformative leader
that Roosevelt was.
That you talked about.
Right.
So, you know, I think we're yet to really see the real potential and the real challenge that's facing Barack Obama.
I was trying to make a point earlier, not separate, but the distinction of our survivability was that we were not integrated when we was in 50 years ago. Mm. During World War II, we had our own financial system, whether it was with the numbers or whatever else in the community. We couldn't go to white banks. We raised most of our own food. We couldn't shop in a lot of places. We financed ourselves. If that's what you call being separate, it was a very stabilizing practice.
But what happened?
And we gave that up.
No, we didn't give it up. What happened? What happened to Rosewood, Florida? What happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Those were things that happened.
Yeah.
And
Tulsa,
like Sankofa,
Oklahoma was one of the wealthiest black communities in the country in 1920.
They weren't trying to integrate.
And the fact of it is, I had this discussion with some friends the other day. One of my friends was insistent on arguing that give me the dollars, give us our own economy. When we had our own economy, we don't need to be involved in politics, he argued. I said, that's nonsense. Look what happened in Rosewood. Look what happened in Tulsa. Look what happened on Southside Chicago. Everything the blacks had, the seminal growth of business enterprises in the black community all came to a halt. Why? Because we had no power. Power and economics are parallel. You need both, not one, not either, or both. And if you don't have both, you are going to get wiped out, as happened in Tulsa and Rosewood, Southside, and other locales where black folks were prospering. They had no power. They had no power.
I'm not talking about that kind of power. I'm talking about, can you feed yourself?
Yeah. Well, the truth of it is a lot of them couldn't. The truth of it is the poverty rate during that period you're talking about among black folks was much, much higher than it is today.
But one
a lot
distinction,
of them couldn't
one
feed
distinction
themselves.
I know from my family, I'm from Mississippi.
Yeah.
We fed ourselves. Even if there was sharecropping, there was a garden. We fed ourselves. Now you got more than 50% of the population is in urban settings. You have 99.9% of all the food that we consume travels 1,500 to 10,000 miles. It's all based on energy. We have a constraint in the energy.
Yeah.
And what I meant by having a system along with the other system,
Yeah.
and I'm not the only one saying this now.
Right.
They're doing it in Europe. They call it transitional towns.
Yeah.
They're doing it in California. They're doing it in Denver. They're doing it.
Elijah Muhammad tried to do
Not like Elijah Muhammad.
Elijah started farms.
They're doing it in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah,
What I mean, they're doing it.
Yeah.
The majority community is going towards something what they call sustainability.
Yeah. Right.
They're looking at different financial models that are sustainable because the international model, they say, is collapsing.
Yeah.
So, not like separating yourself physically. I'm talking about as what we're looking at continues to roll out. We talked about it earlier, Bruce, as it continues to roll out, what structures of support that we can have in place that allow us to maintain the integrity.
I agree that we must come up in this transitional period with some ideas to give us that sustainability, particularly in these very difficult times. But I look at Elijah Muhammad. I remember that Elijah Muhammad did all of that. Elijah Muhammad urged black folk to grow your own food. They bought up thousands of acres of farmland in the South. They had their own fleet of trucks, and they shipped the products from their farmland in the South to their supermarkets, your supermarket, on the South Side, in Harlem, in Philly, all over. Elijah Muhammad saw the big picture, and he understood that black people must build their own infrastructure. But that too fell apart. And it is a very sad commentary. Sad commentary. Though I stick to my original thesis, we are probably the world's masters at survival. But we are, and we are very creative. But we are so creative that we tend to, once we create something, we tend to forget about it and move on to something else. And in music, the same thing, you see it. In blues, we were talking about the blues. I mean, we're about to lose an artistic form that we created. Rock and roll, we created. Every genre that's native, every genre of music that's native to America was created by blacks. Now I'm saying native, I'm not talking about classical music, that's not native to America. But every genre of music native to America was created by black, and more specifically, was created by black men between the ages of 16 and 30, 1635.
See, I'm not comfortable with
Now,
this.
may I
I
join this conversation?
Yeah.
For one thing, green is the new black. And I said that because I'm not talking about the survival of our community as black people, but as human beings who wish to survive and to develop and to grow. the point that Fred made cannot be overlooked, and it cannot be circumvented. And that is that if you are in a situation where the economy is based upon continuous, unrelenting extraction of raw materials from the earth, you reach a point at which you can no longer do that. You cannot keep taking from Mother Nature. You cannot keep taking.
That's why recycling.
You can't keep clearing the forests.
That's right.
You can't keep polluting the air, polluting the water. You can't keep polluting the land. You cannot continue to act as though there are no limits, that nature just has to surrender and to accept that you are a parasite on it, that you intend to destroy what you yourself did not create. So if we're talking about survival, we've got to be talking about being a part of an economy that is sustainable. This economy is not sustainable. You cannot continue to take and take. What is that, a cancer? Are cancer cells what continue to feed on healthy cells until it finally what? Destroys the entire organism. So we have to focus on the fact that we need to join with other progressive people, people who are looking at this thing and they're saying, you can't continue this. This is suicidal.
It
We're
is.
on the wrong path. We're going in the wrong direction. And we need to think about not only our future today, but we need to be thinking about the future for our children. We cannot leave them in a situation where they will perish because we have ignored the fact that we have taken more than the earth wants us to take from it without putting anything back. So green is the new black. And that's the election, to have a leader to look at that, to consider those as critical issues. The survival of the human race on the planet Earth is more important than saving Wall Street, than the global markets. Global warming is a much greater issue. And this is what we must insist that we hear when our candidates are talking to us.
Gloria, you heard about the black woman from Kenya who 4 years ago won the Nobel Peace Prize. Her name is Mathias. She's a member of parliament in Kenya. She won because she set to implement the very policies that you were talking about. She was green. She set about teaching poor women in Kenya how to preserve the environment, stop cutting trees down for firewood, plant trees. And she started a seed program. Many African countries have depleted the soil. Because of their lack of economic sufficiency, have been very destructive in terms of looking out for these natural, the survival of nature that they depend so heavily on. This black woman was in Chicago when shortly after she won the Nobel Prize. She came here.
Your point is perfect. You said black people.
Now that's one black lady I wanted to say that on an international level has been very, very much involved in trying to wake black people up to the green movement. And I don't know of any other black leader has done what she has done.
But if we don't have black leaders who do this, then we are traveling down the path of destruction.
Absolutely.
We cannot continue to depend upon a currency, and you're a world traveler. And you know that when you leave this country, nobody wants to see our currency. Anywhere you go, they want more dollars than they do their own currency for anything that they have to sell, because we are trying to throw money at problems that money will not solve. And there has got to be a radical change in social behavior. We have simply got to, recycling is not something that you do because, you know, you can
It's
do
the
it or
hip thing to
occasionally
do.
you do it. You do
It's
it
a
because
necessity.
you have to live on this planet.
Right.
And if you pollute it to the extent that you cannot breathe the air on it, you will perish. So these are common sense things, and we must do what we can to raise the level of awareness of our people, that this
Well, I
is
think
what we
that's the
want
key
to
point
hear
there.
our
Yeah.
candidates talk to us about.
Well, we need to raise the level of awareness of our people. I think we many times try to put the leaders up here,
Yeah, that's
and we don't deal with where the people are at. The people have to call for what you're asking for. They have to as well understand the
We
importance.
the people,
Right.
you the people,
Right.
he the people,
Exactly.
he the people, we the
Without
people.
a doubt.
That's-
And those are the ones who need to raise this. You know, just to say, you know, Barack Obama or the president of the Cook County Board or whoever your local congressman is, but they need to be pressured by the Freds and others to make this issue a priority and put it on the table.
They can't keep asking taxpayers to give more money, you know, so you give some more
the
money.
Taxpayers have to raise this issue. It has to come from
It
the
gotta
people.
come from
The
That's
people
what
got
I
to
meant
call
by
for sustainability.
Election, whoever's in election or not in election. If, like Obama said, if it don't happen on the ground, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah, you got it's got to.
And the conversation I'm in is I know it might not be.
No, I think you're coming from the right perspective.
The conversation I'm in is when you say survival, when you got soil depletion, that's the way it's going now. Our nutritional,
Desertification.
our nutritional
Yeah.
ability to respond in a healthy manner, which impacts our ability to survive. I know black people, we got this background conversation that we can make it through everything. But my grandmother ate food that, and they smoked and drank whiskey and they lived to be 100 years old. What she ate when she was young and what I ate when I was young is different. I'm talking I'm talking about our genetic future too. And it's not isolated. This is a
No,
This
Fred,
is going on.
I think you on the right issue.
So it doesn't matter
But
to me when I
concerns
say
me is that this is where the conversation needs to be,
Right.
and it needs to come up out of here. We need to not be looking for leaders
got it.
to,
Well, people
but to take this position. It has to be a position of the people where the people are calling for, where the leader know when he walk in the room with the people, he better be able to speak to this
That's
issue.
exactly what Roosevelt meant when he told A. Philip Randolph, I understand everything you said, but now go out there and make me do it.
Well, see,
He said, get the people, in other words.
And I agree, Fred.
Yeah.
I think, Fred,
Yeah.
you're on the right page.
Yeah.
I mean,
All right, and that's where it needs to be coming from. But let's not look for the leaders. Let's get it out here.
You can't be
for the
my
people.
leader if you're not in front of me.
That's fine.
You can't be back here
Well, that's
leading
fine,
me.
but believe
Yeah.
me, leaders respond to what the people want to do.
Leaders
and
aren't
leaders
leaders
put their
if
ear
they're
to
not-
their ear to the people.
Bruce.
And when whatever position that the leaders are taking, they done heard it from the people already.
That's
I tell
what,
you,
Bruce.
one
Well,
of
that's
the-
the reality of the leadership.
One of the dangers of blind followship, though, there's a flip side to that coin. And one of the dangers of the blind followship is that the gullibility of so many people, not just black people. We not long ago commemorated the 20th anniversary of Jonestown, Guyana, when those 900 black people, mostly elderly women, black elderly women, followed this madman, Jim Jones, down to Jonestown, Guyana, and drank the cyanide laced Kool-Aid. 900 of them lost their lives. When you got people who are so gullible that charismatic individuals can take complete control of their mind, body, and soul. You need the right kind of leaders. And there are gifted individuals who have this thing we call charisma, who use it for good. But if you don't, but some of them use it for evil. And the people that we so embrace and speak of so lovingly are often very gullible. They're often very gullible. So we need leaders challenging leaders. Somebody should have been challenging Jim Jones. How did Jim Jones? That's a case study, in my estimation, of blind followership. Why didn't the so-called leaders of the day challenge?
That question, I think collectively we all are like the people that follow Jim Jones, because we're all following a path of suicide.
You got to be analytical. You got to be more analytical.
We are following a path that's going to hit a wall, and we're on the same bus, and we on this bus, everybody's arguing about what seat they on.
Yeah.
We're debating about where we're sitting on the bus, but the bus is accelerating at 1,000 miles per hour, and nobody is concerned about directing the bus. We're so concerned about where we sit. And I have to be honest, I have to look at myself, because it's like a detox.
Yeah.
I was brought up with believing certain things and conditioned, blah, 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 just like all of us have.
Yeah.
And I followed a pattern based on that. But when I became aware that that pattern was leading me to ill direction, be it financial, even the model of success. You know, I know what it is to be a millionaire. I've been there, all that model of success. But when I looked at the amount of energy that it takes to put in something that somebody else designed for me as a value system, I had to stop and look at myself.
That's right. Now,
and that's the part I'm talking. We are just like the people in Jonestown. We are following.
For the most part, we haven't gone to that extent, but
we are going to that extent.
You know what? I visit black churches.
And this is an uncomfortable conversation.
It's very uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable because
it's very uncomfortable
to see how unwell we are personally.
And to see how gullible, how easily we are misled.
I'm not willing to accept that. I'm willing to accept the fact that we have been in a condition called slavery, which we are still in.
Mental.
Not just mental, we are in we are oppressed, suppressed people. The Emancipation Proclamation was a scam, was a farce. We are still not making the decisions that determine our destiny. We are still not following the best leadership we've had down through the centuries. Honorable Elijah Muhammad being one of them, Marcus Garvey being another, Martin Delaney being another. We have had leader after leader after leader. And we have also been visited by the most continuous oppression that any people have ever suffered on this planet. And despite the fact that we are resilient and that we bounce back and we make a way out of no way and we improvise, there is a limit to human endurance. There's a limit to how much you can be in battle and not finally suffer from battle fatigue. And I think that at this point in our history, rather than see ourselves as pathetic people who are just stumbling along, we must see that our condition is imposed and it can be removed in the same way that it was imposed. Now that's a lot of radical kind sounding talk. But the thing is, if we're going to talk about survival, we've got to talk about survival in a way that truly means survival. If we're going to talk about leaders, you have to recognize what a leader is. In an African society, you could not be a leader if you could not manage your own household. Who could ever hear of someone being out front trying to tell other people what to do, a whole community what to do, if they couldn't manage the people who lived with them in their own compound? So we've got a lot of people who are out here emulating or impersonating leaders who cannot truly be called leaders because they don't have a track record. The other thing is they have not come from us. Many times our leaders are given, you know this, Bruce, very often the people who run for public office are people who can get backers from people who have an interest in controlling our community.
Look, I grew up in Chicago. I went to both parochial and public schools in Chicago. I know the experience of being a black man in this environment. I know that Barack Obama, even though he represents the state of Illinois, he hasn't experienced what I experienced. I know that the people, the big heavyweight political people who are behind Barack Obama are some of the biggest oppressors of black people in the world. I know all of this.
What are we going to do with that information?
So these are the realities of what we're dealing with in the environment that we're living in.
What do you do with that information, Bruce?
I think, well, we go back to what we were saying. It's the people. We need to develop leadership and education and knowledge among the people. And we need to stop looking for the charismatic leader to come up out of our midst.
The Messiah.
I mean, Nate has clearly showed the example of what Elijah Muhammad had when he created the concept of the Nation of Islam and put all those institutions together, and you look now at where those institutions are and you say,
they have disintegrated.
It doesn't, because something didn't succeed the first time it was tried does not mean it was a bad idea. Ask Donald Trump. Ask him how many times he was bankrupt before he put what he has downtown.
The point, I know what he's saying. Well, the point is that the ideas of great men too often die with them. It's not institutionalized, these things that they have accomplished, and so they disintegrate. Soon as that leader leaves the scene, there's hardly any trace.
But Garvey's ideas didn't disintegrate. They murdered Garvey in a real sense because they destroyed him from the inside
out. If his leadership had been institutionalized, if his programs had been institutionalized, Garvey would just have been a symbolic figure. They would still be going on. Look what happened at Push a few years ago.
So institutionalization.
That's why you have a constitution.
You can have
the president is really insignificant. The president leave office after 4 years, or if he is lucky to be reelected, 8 years. But the nation continues along the same lines because it's embedded in the Constitution.
No, it's embedded in the people who control the office of the president.
It is important to understand the difference between charismatic leadership and institutionalized vehicles. Institutionalized vehicles that will continue on with the program of these leaders who have been very beneficial. Too often in the community, we depended on these saviors. We have been misled. We have depended on one man or one woman. You know what Harriet Tubman once said? She freed hundreds of slaves, right? She went in and out of the plantations of the South, freed hundreds. But she made one statement that has always stuck with me, and I remember. She said, you know, I could have freed more if they had known they were slaves. They did not have the mentality to be freed. And I think what has happened with the failure of Elijah's programs, not the man, the failure of his programs, with the failure of Rosewood, with the failure of the entrepreneurial advances, Marcus Garvey movement. It was one charismatic leader. We somehow failed. Right here in Chicago, Jesse Jackson quit Push a few years ago, moved to Washington, D.C. What happened? Push almost fell apart.
But see,
Nobody, 4 different so-called leaders came in
but they
and
were
tried to
never-
run it.
the structure was set up to.
The structure, that's right.
the
It was set up
structure itself.
around a charismatic
The
leader.
structure.
It
If
was
a
not
structure is not
institutionalized.
designed. Let's
That's
talk
right.
about design.
That's right.
principles.
That's the whole point
If
I'm
a
making.
structure is
Yeah.
not designed to be sustainable,
Yes, that's true.
it will not sustain
Because
itself.
there's no constitution, and I don't mean just
Some of those
constitution
organizations
in the
had
sense of
constitutions.
a piece of paper, but I mean some adherence to a set of dictates. Call them laws, dictates, mandates, whatever you want to call them. Some adherence which has the general acceptance of the people. But if we don't do that, we repeat the mistakes of Garvey comes along, Elijah comes along, Malcolm comes along. They create great programs and they die with them. We must have some system of ideas that we just generally agree to, so it won't really matter if Garvey is gone.
Here's an idea that I offer as
Yeah.
the foundation idea of
Yeah.
a system of ideas. Do for self.
Yeah.
That's
what Elijah,
Garvey said. That's what it does not matter
yeah.
how many times you try and fail to do for self. That should not make you abandon attempting to do for self. Because Jesse was right when he said this: nobody's going to save us but us.
That's right.
So if we are not willing to mount the effort, you cannot be defeated because something that you attempt does not succeed the first time
Well,
or
you
the
just said
second
it. I mean,
time.
you just
Well,
said it.
if it's worth
How
doing-
resilient we are, how
We're
we
resilient.
combat.
If
But-
if it's worthwhile doing, do it.
Well, we
See,
combat.
do it
We
again.
combat.
But that resilience still needs some kind of institutional form.
the
And if it
models
does
of-
not have an institutional form, you'll keep doing the same old things over and over. We should be making moves in a lateral fashion. Instead, we do circular. Our history in this country has been circular. We have done repeatedly what you have said, but instead of a linear growth, it's just circular.
And
the
But
reason,
see,
part of that
this-
is leadership.
This
but a
problem-
lot of it is also the failure
Part
to
of that is we
understand,
start in this direction and the leader says, no, you want to go over
but the
here.
failure to understand
another one
the
says
need.
you wanna go this
not
way.
having those
Not
dictates,
having those things
those
in hand, those
institutional
dictates,
policies
those institutional
that you follow.
laws that you follow. That's more important.
Let's take this out of isolation again.
Yeah,
Do for self applies to any culture.
yeah,
Black people are not the only one caught in this unsustainable lifestyle.
that's true. That's true.
We're talking about the whole community. And all of us in the community are sold that right to what we call the institutional structure of corporations. We gave up the right to build our houses. We gave up the right to grow our food. We gave up the right to educate our children. We've given that up to what we call institutional structures that are designed,
That we didn't design.
that
He
were
said
designed, that are designed to make profit
Yeah,
for a very small community of people.
make you dependent on them.
And that's a problem that all of us collectively
Yeah.
face, white, black, green, yellow, it doesn't
Yeah,
really matter.
that's true. That's true.
So
Absolutely.
the conversation of survivability applies those principles. These are universal principles that I'm trying to point to that are based on sustainable designs that's been here for thousands of years.
Yeah,
And we've been hoodwinked. It's been trillions of dollars put in to educate us to not see that. We've been taught to have our power dominated by Edison. Here we're at a point now, the power of Edison, they can't maintain the structure either. But we have been taught and trained
yeah.
that this model, all of us following, like in Guyana, we all following that model, and it's taking us all to hell.
Yeah.
Whether we
Yeah.
white, black, green, we all are following an unsustainable lifestyle and we need to do something about it.
You know, the capitalist system is designed to keep all of us collectively enslaved to a certain extent, if not by chains, by certain materialistic desires. Richard Wright wrote a book in the 40s called The Outsider, and it was one of the first works of existentialism. And in the book, he talks about how we are all like sheep. We follow a few so-called captains of industry and others, and we never question what we have blindly accepted. In the book, The Outsider, Richard Wright at the time, he was living in Chicago, used to work at the main post office, downtown Chicago. And to show to a friend of his what sheep people were, he went up on the top floor and dropped some change, just pennies and nickels, 9 floors down, and just stood there and watched the people scramble for these few pennies. He said, that's the way we are. That's the way society keeps us under control, keeps us scrambling for the scraps off the tables of the masters. There are whites in Appalachia who are in just as bad off economically or worse than blacks. But Dr. King tried reaching out to them with his Poor People's March and got rejected because these whites, though they were poor, they had that one thing to cling to. They were white. And they did not, therefore, want to listen to the rationale Dr. King put forward for them to join the Poor People's March. They felt it was not in their interest. People don't always act in their self-interest.
We've been
and that's one of the things.
They don't act in their self-interest.
Back on the political discussion.
They will cut their noses off to spite their faces.
That is one of the big questions with the November vote.
Yeah.
If white Democrats in particular will see Barack Obama in their best interest, or will they feel that their best interest is voting for a white person? You know, what was that number? What was the figure?
Look, you have AP Yahoo did a survey last week.
That's what I'm talking about.
And it was a survey on hidden racism. That racism that most whites would be reluctant to talk to a pollster about. So they designed this survey. It was not your typical poll. They designed this survey to uncover that hidden racism so Barack would understand what he's really up against. In the survey, they came up with a list of adjectives to describe black people. They asked whites, pick out among these adjectives which ones, in your mind, describe black people. Adjectives such as smart, dumb, lazy, responsible, go-getter, irresponsible. And 1/3. Barack's problem is not so much with Republicans, because the Democratic registration, the registration of Democrats in this country is far higher than Republicans who are registered. Far higher. It is not, if he just get the Democratic vote, he don't have to worry about crossovers. When they did this AP Yahoo survey, they discovered that from the responses of whites who picked out these negative adjectives as descriptive of black people in general, that this suggested that Barack Obama, 1/3 of white Democrats, he's likely to have difficulty getting them to vote for him. 1/3 of white Democrats. He don't have to even worry about the independents and the Republicans if he could just get to that 1/3 of white Democrats. And some of these people would deny that they're racist, but yet that's why this poll was designed the way it was,
We have a short time, so I want you to...
Yeah, okay. So I found this AP Yahoo poll very suggestive of the problem, the hidden problem. It's called the Bradley effect, by the way, you know, after former black
Is that anything like the
mayor
Bubba effect?
of L.A., Bradley. When,
Is that like the Bubba effect? Because that's another one.
well,
that
the
they're
Bubba
describing.
effect is just simply one of those elements that the Bubba effect is rather obvious. This poll tried to uncover the not so obvious.
Okay.
The people who would deny that they are Bubba, who would deny that they are racist, but yet hold these negative attitudes about blacks.
See,
We don't have much time, Fred,
here.
so you have to make it quickly.
the education
Yeah,
that we've gotten is that we're separate.
yeah.
And that's the foundation of our conversation. And if we've been trained and educated that we not only are we separate as human beings, but we're also separate from the planet.
You're a separate
Yeah.
species.
We're separate. That's the for me, that's the fundamental problem that we all share, whether we white, green, black, is the fact is that we live in a closed system, whether you're white or black, and that's the education that we need to start getting out here.
Well, I just want to say that as we began, I still want us to understand that whether or not either candidate is elected, we still have to survive. We still have to be focused upon, as Nate has said, we cannot be fixed on one man to solve the problems of all of us. We have to do what we need to do. We have to do our share. We have to raise the level of awareness. We have to focus on survival, regardless of whether or not Obama wins the election or not, whether or not whoever becomes the next mayor, how many offices, governor, senator, whoever takes those offices, if we do not succeed in preventing the theft of the elections, which we struggle so hard to gain the right to vote in, if we succeed in getting elections to be fair and legal, which is what you do, Bruce, the Committee to Preserve Voting Rights, if we succeed in preserving the voting rights so that elections are fair and equitable, and we do get leadership that can be relied upon, we will have an advantage. But with either way, we must focus on the survival and development of the human race on this planet, and that has to be the priority that we focus on. And as Obama said today, we ought to be able to do more than one thing at one time. Elect a president and survive too. I don't think it's an either or proposition. Do you agree?
I agree. I agree. Okay. I think we have not run out of that impulse to survive. We are, as a people, going to make it through whatever